Welcome to Point to Rise, your podcast that gives you permission to dream big, take messy action, and turn your talent into profit while turning your back on perfection. My name is Suzanne Purcell, high performance and mindset coach, former international ballerina, profitable entrepreneur, and founder of Point to Rise, a movement designed to empower dancers. It is my mission to use my own story as an inspiration for today's generation of dancers. And now sit back, stretch, warm up, or sip your coffee and love learning how much it matters to point at yourself first to rise to all that you are capable of. Alexandra Farber, originally from Washington, D.C., began her training at Maryland Youth Ballet and Houston Ballet, too. Alexandra has also attended various summer programs, including those offered by the School of American Ballet Theater, San Francisco Ballet School, and the Houston Ballet Ben Stevens Academy. She joined Texas Ballet Theater in 2012, and in her time there has performed as Odette-Odile, as Aurora in Sleeping Beauty, Svetlana in Dracula, the Sugar Plum, the Snow Queen and Clara in the Nutcracker, the Winter Fairy in Cinderella, and in William Forsythe's In the Middle, Somewhat Elevated. In Ben Stevens' Twilight, pas de deux, and his 4 last songs. She also performed leading roles in George Balanchine's Allegro, Brillante, Jerome Robbins The Concert, Glenn Tetley's Voluntaries, Carlos Acosta's Carmen, Christopher Wheeldon's DGV Dance à Grande Vitesse, and many, many, many more. Her mixed media art was accepted into Virgin Artists' New York City 30 Under 30 show in 2021. The Way We Change was an official selection in the L'Age d'Or International Arthurs Film Festival and won Best Dance Film from the Silk Road Film Awards Cannes. Alexandra is passionate about art making and supports those who do this on a consistent basis. In our interview today, we talked a lot about her learns and her ways of understanding what 2020 not only had deprived her of, but what it actually had given to her. And she was able to really dive into herself as an artist and as a producer, as a choreographer, and creating outside the studio. So without no further ado, enjoy today's conversation. Here's Alexandra. Thank you, Beth. She's the new staple in Zoom recordings.
Oh, I didn't know.
Oh yeah, I named her. I totally did. Because she's
a new thing. I guess I haven't been on a recorded Zoom call in like a minute, but I guess that's nice.
Alexandra, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really, really appreciate you taking such fast actions, reaching out and saying, hey, I have things that I want to say. And I wanted to commend you for your courage and for your action taking. I think it's very special, and definitely I see it as a superpower that you have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. So tell us, before we're gonna get started and dive into today's topics, I want to know, what do you think your superpowers are?
My superpowers, it reminds me of those questions that they ask you on like applications where they're like, describe yourself in 3 words.
Oh yeah. No, none of that. Brag.
No. It just like, that's the first thing I think of. And the first word that I always use to describe myself is creative. Not just in an artistic sense, but also in a like opportunity sense. Like I've always very much had the mentality of like, well, if something's missing from my life or my world, like what can I do to make it possible? Like where can I go and where are the people who are interested? Because you know, whether it's dance, choreography, art, or anything else, there are people out there who I know feel the same ways that I do. So it's not about, you know, you just like, oh, well, there's not enough around me or something like that. It's, you just have to get creative and find out how you can find those people. So I think the ability to be creative is probably something I'm most grateful for as like a superpower.
Oh, I love that. I want to point this out if the listeners may have missed it, that the belief that there isn't enough or it just can't be done.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. It is a superpower to like look beyond that statement, because that is such a finite, the end of the tunnel kind of belief and thinking, where people with creativity, with superpowers like yours, are actually having the ability to look beyond that kind of thinking, and therefore also find more and solutions, right? So yeah, I definitely would say that is a really beautiful superpower. Hey, born and raised, and where do you live currently?
So I was born and raised in the Washington, D.C. area. My family all still lives there on the East Coast. And I grew up in the area, went to traditional public schooling, or private schooling and public schooling kind of mismatched, but went to a ballet school there, but, you know, not like a boarding school or anything like that. And then I graduated from high school in 2011. And after that, I came down to Texas, which is where I live now. And I started at Houston Ballet in their second company, HB2, and was there for 1 year, and then joined Texas Ballet Theater in the Dallas-Fort Worth area 1 year later, and have been there ever since. So I am on my 10th season, I think, with TBT this upcoming season. So
Congratulations.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Favorite place to travel to?
Oh, that's so hard. Oh, there's so many amazing places. I was just in LA last weekend and that was amazing. But I'm going home to the East Coast this next week, which I also love. But then so many places abroad, places I haven't been yet that I want to go to.
What's
Um,
on your list?
oh, I've never been to Germany, which I know is
Okay, you need to go. Yeah.
I absolutely need to go. That's been on the list for a long time. Um, when I graduated from college, my like graduation present from my family was to help me take a trip to Ireland. And I graduated last July, so obviously that hasn't happened yet. But Ireland's definitely big on my list, especially because my grandfather was born and raised there. So really want to get back there for sure. Um, but I could list places forever. Never been to Greece, never been to the south of France. I've only ever been to Paris. Definitely need to head there. A lot of places in Europe. I took a trip to Japan a few years ago and it was just life changing. So like I would love to go back there, but there's just so many places.
Okay, you can put all of them on the list and tackle them. You
Right?
have the time to. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, a book that you read that changed your thinking.
Oh, I just finished a book. Um, the name of the author is Sarah Rose Etter. I think I'm pronouncing it right. And it's called The Book of X. I just finished it last week. And it's fiction, like kind of surreal fiction, but it very much has to do with the female experience and sort of like a very brutal look at it. It's definitely a mature book because it talks about some like difficult subjects, but um, like I don't consider myself necessarily a feminist. I consider myself a humanist, but I think to understand that perspective and to hear it from another woman was just really powerful. So I highly recommend that for definitely like 16 and up. It's a little bit heavy, but
Yeah.
really.
Wow. Thank you. Last but not least, I'll let you off the hook here in a moment. A childhood memory that really, really has not impacted you, but that you just keep still in you, that
I
that you
think
carry with you. So there we go.
particularly because we're talking about ballet and dance and stuff, and what it's like to be a dancer, and what the true heart of being a dancer is. When I was little, my mom had this figurine, and I actually have it in my apartment now. I kind of was like, Mom, can I take this with me down to Texas? It's a figurine, like a ceramic, and it's a dancer, and she's just kind of sitting in like it's not like any real ballet position. She's just kind of like sitting on the side, and she has like a little soft port-de-bras, and she has a headpiece on that looks like Swan Lake. So that she's like representing Swan Lake, maybe Odette or something like that. And I can remember distinctly being like 6 maybe years old, and being downstairs in our basement where it was kept like on a shelf, and taking it down off the shelf and like sitting it next to me and like trying to mimic it, and like just sitting there and trying to be like, I just want to do that, like I just want to be this ballerina person. So that's a memory that I really, really love to think about, especially after getting to perform Odette-Odile a couple of years ago for the first time. I definitely felt like, that little girl would be really excited about that for sure. So
that is such a pretty memory to carry. Yeah.
I have the little, you want me to grab it?
Yeah, show us. And for you guys listeners that are not on YouTube yet, go check us out on YouTube under Point to Rise. You can watch all of the interviews actually with us there. There she is. Oh my goodness.
It's very,
oh yes, it is.
The fingers are like broken off now, but yeah, it's like not really any, she's just sitting like, not really any real ballet position, but to a little girl, like this was just
everything.
Ultimate. And I think it belonged to my great grandmother. My mom's side, they were very big into antiques and figurines and stuff like that. So we had a lot of things like that growing up, but that one's particularly special to me. So
this is such a beautiful segue into talking about your career. We definitely will get into that, but I want to know, where did this very first knowing come from? Do you remember what that felt like and how that came out?
It's so hard to remember for me. My mom put me in ballet classes when I was 3 years old. I mean, I don't remember back to then. I have some very early memories of like my first ballet bag, which might still be in my family's home somewhere. And like going to classes, and we went to just like a teeny tiny studio that was like in a strip mall for like many years until I got a bit older. I have some memories of like the rooms in there, and then it was under construction, so it like changed. I remember rooms in there, but as far as like knowing, oh, this is what I want to do, it was just a thing of like every year my mom was like, do you want to sign up again? Like, did you enjoy that? Do you want to do that? And every year I was just like, yeah. And it just kept going and going. And then I get to be 9 or 10, and I had kind of outgrown the little like strip mall school. So my mom was like, well, like, you seem to really enjoy this. We can put you in more serious classes if you think you'd be interested. So we did. I auditioned for a couple different schools. And the funny thing is, the reason why I chose the school that I did, because, you're a little kid, most kids get into these schools. The reason why my mom let me choose, and when I said that I wanted to pick this one, she didn't ask why, I don't think. But the reason why I did was because the dressing room atmosphere was just really chatty and fun. Like I just felt like there were so many cool girls there, and I just wanted to hang out with everybody. And I think that period of time was the only time that I thought I didn't want to dance, because I remember going from like a much smaller school, like where I was probably dancing 2 or 3 days a week, to like dancing every day. Maybe not yet at that age, but I just remember being like, oh, this is tiring. Like, I don't know. But I always was excited to go back. And yeah, when I got to be a teenager, I realized it could be a potential career. And it took a lot of education and research from me and my parents, because no one in our family had ever pursued that before. And nobody knew anything about the dance world. And but there was no like one moment that I was like, oh, I want to do this. There was just, it was always there, that love. Like I kind of can't remember a time without it, which is very strange. It's like other than walking around and talking and breathing and eating, like I've done ballet. Like it's one of the first things I ever really did, like was dance, which is pretty interesting to think about.
Beautiful. Okay, let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a whole thing.
That was quite a curveball for all of us, but I think particularly for performing artists, that was something that never ever was considered could happen. Nobody ever thought of what's our backup plan. Would you care to maybe walk us through what your emotional roller coaster, or maybe you weren't on one, what that looked like, not only to dive into it, but maybe also to give others permission that all of these feelings are completely valid and normal, and here is how you can get to the other side.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't think anyone didn't go on an emotional roller coaster. And if it wasn't for one reason, it was for another.
Right.
I mean, obviously the pandemic itself was very stressful and like there wasn't a lot of information at the start. And I'm very far away from my family down in Texas. And of course, my parents being older was worried about them, didn't feel safe to travel, wasn't sure when I was going to be able to travel. Are we coming back to the studios? What's happening? Like, are we going to have to, like, what's going on? So the first like month or two were very confusing. And that was a total shock to the system. I also, at the time, was single. I uh, didn't have roommates. So I was completely isolated. Um, and I mean, I remember after a few weeks, like of really not making contact with anyone, my hair started to fall out. Like even though on the surface I felt like, okay, I'm handling it. Like there were clear indications from my body that I was just not okay and that it's just not human to not have that personal interaction like day to day with anyone. Like I was going to the store once every 2 weeks, and other than that, I was really, really quarantining because of just the fear of the unknown. Um, After that, I had a couple of friends who were in town. We decided, we're in an age group, we don't have existing conditions. It's probably safe for us couple women to gather together, as if we were kind of roommates because we were all just losing our minds. So
Yeah.
it was definitely really helpful, because some people here had their families and we were like, well, we're going to have to make our own family because we're all away from our family. So things got better once I was able to be with people. And then I had a couple people who, like I had a friend of mine who lives in California, and he and I were he used to dance with me and now he works over there. We would FaceTime each other for like 6 hours a day. Like we would spend the day together virtually just so that we could feel connection because it was so challenging. So that was definitely like the big first hurdle, was like the connection thing. And then things started to, get a little bit easier, kind of, towards the end of the summer, our company tried to go back to work. It was very mixed, but I think we were just all so thrilled. Like, even though we had masks and boxes of tape on the floor and the whole thing, we were just happy to be in a room together, even if it was just like 10 of us. But it was communication was really challenging and difficult from the company. It was not easy to know what was going on, what was going to be produced, what was not. And I mean, you can't blame them too much because like they couldn't predict it either, and they're at the mercy of the halls and the venues and what other productions are doing and the donors and everything like that. So it was just to be the performer in that situation. I don't think people realize like how like we're the sort of the last ones who know any of that information. So it was a lot of like waiting around, not knowing what was going on. I was really missing my family a lot because I usually go home a couple times a year. So to not have that was pretty challenging. It's been a year and a half and I've been home with my family for 2 days, which is just like totally different from what I'm used to. So that was challenging. And then come fall time, the numbers were not high enough for us to do much of anything. But the good thing is that I was finding all these new avenues of ways that I wanted to express myself and people that I could safely gather with in small numbers. I joined an art gallery and was a resident artist at a gallery locally for 6 months. That's where I met my boyfriend. We met at the end of 2020. We didn't start dating until early 2021. I was convinced that I was going to be single all of 2021 and like really do that. And of course, it didn't work out because I met him and we just connected really, really well. But so there were definitely bright spots in the emotional roller coaster. But there were a lot of low days for sure. And I think everyone experienced that, and no one should feel any ounce of shame or anything around that. And it, in a lot of ways, allowing myself to feel those emotions helped me to learn more about myself, which brought me to a place where I could meet someone like my boyfriend, and I could have these other opportunities. So yeah, that was 2020 in a nutshell.
Yeah. So what's different now? Because, as much as we're pretending that 2020 didn't happen, and I mean that from a place of love, because, all everybody just wanted was to go back to normal, underestimating the impact and what it actually could mean for us, not only in a sense of like distortion and pain, but also opportunities and who am I now becoming? So what is it that you're taking with you, and what are you leaving behind?
Definitely. I mean, on a whole, 2020 was a mess, and I would love for none of those situations to ever happen again. But there, like I mentioned with bright spots, like there are so many positive things that came out of it for me. One of which is that I just realized how much creativity I was stifling because I was just afraid A, it wouldn't be perfect. B, I didn't see other women in ballet doing the things that I wanted to do. C, I didn't think I was good enough in a lot of different ways. And I think having all that time to myself and being outside of our normal workplace and really getting to reflect opened that up for me. Like for a really long time, I was like, oh, my dream job after being a dancer would be to be a repetitor or someone who works with a choreographer. And then I kind of came to realize, like, wait, no, I think I really just want to choreograph. Like, I don't think I want to do this behind the scenes thing. But then I like thought about how male the side of choreography is. I mean, there are some great female choreographers I've not yet gotten to work with, and I really hope I get to work with. But I realized like it is that situation of like, I'm not seeing this around me. So of course it didn't occur to me, but like so many of the repetitors who come in who I love and like I still think it's an amazing job, but they're almost always female. And I'm like, oh, like I think I just got confused because this is the way it always was. And I never really considered it because day in, day out, like this was just my job and this was just what I saw. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And then I was like, wait a second. Like I want to choreograph, like I have ideas, like I want to give it a shot. So we did a couple choreography projects with the company during the weird 2020 season. And then since then, I've been pursuing it. And I think I talked about it briefly in one of the emails to you, but this next Friday, oh my gosh, is it already next Friday? July 9th, I am premiering my first major work on an online platform with a good friend of mine. Her name is Silken Kelly. She started a nonprofit called Contingent Ballet, and we're co-producing 3 pieces in a night of ballet that we're calling On New Ground, but it's designed to be outside of theaters. Like it's designed to bring ballet to non-traditional audiences and the whole thing. But none of that would have happened if we weren't in this really crazy situation. Like I would have probably just left those thoughts on the back burner while I was super busy doing, normal ballet stuff. And And the same thing goes for my visual art. Like I've been creating visual art more seriously and like applying to shows for like the last 4 to 5 years, but really kind of forever also. Um, and I finally was like, I want to look for galleries locally, like why not? And I found this place um, called Tilt Vision Art Studios. They're kind of transitioning into like a different thing now, so no longer with them. But when I first brought my art to audition it, they were like, these are amazing. Like, how many have you sold? And I was like, oh, they like stay in my closet. And they're like, why aren't you showing your work? And I was like, well, sometimes I apply to a show here or there. But they were like, you absolutely should bring this to the art market. Like, it's valuable. And I think, I didn't see other dancers around, dancers just did the dancer thing and that was kind of it. And like, maybe you went to school. I mean, I did, I got my degree. I'm really happy with that. But, like I was sort of like, there's other stuff out there though, that I'm curious about. And until we had time to take a break and think about things differently, I never, pursued them before, but now I'm like, okay, like, I'm so glad.
I'm so grateful that you're opening that door because yes, aren't we? Were we? Are we not right now? Also under the belief that being a dancer requires our 2000% at every single time. And I think we're underestimating the power of diversity, where dipping our toes into other things, like you partnering with a completely different company, putting on a completely different project, will open up your abilities as a performer, as an artist, as a ballerina in a completely different way that then will help you to show up completely different, even if it's more self-confidence, and oh, I can do this too. So standing on stage and doing Odette-Odile is not a big deal anymore because I can do harder things. And I think the diversity factor is being so underestimated. And I love you giving yourself that permission and seeing it and moving it to that next version of yourself. And it's so important. So what I really want to say, keep going. Like, what else is there? Like, ask yourself the question, what else is there that I can do? And isn't that funny? We're keeping things in our closets, not thinking that, oh, it's not perfect. And for other people, it is the best thing. So what's to learn here?
Right. It's like the thing about perfectionism.
Yeah.
Another thing
Shall
that
we?
I feel like,
Oh, let's do it.
I feel like it's like sometimes people like brag about it, and I'm like, it's not a good thing. Perfectionism is just procrastination under another word, in my opinion. It's like you use perfectionism to say, I'll put it off until it's perfect. It won't ever be perfect. Like, you're just procrastinating at that point. And there's such a mentality in the dance world of like, oh, well, we're just, me, I'm just a perfectionist. I'm such a perfectionist. And people say it like it's a good thing. And I'm like, it's really like not, it's really like limiting you and me and everybody else. Like, let's throw that out. Like, let's never say it again. Like,
yeah, isn't it funny how not only the industry has has adapted it and it's asking for it.
right.
And then, of course, the trickle down effect happens and people wear it as a badge of honor and not really understanding. And again, following what has been given to them, not seeing a difference. And this is why people like you is so important, because you ask yourself a different question. Why are there not many female choreographers? Does that mean I can't do it? Or does that just mean I actually need to more step into it because I really want to set that example for others to follow? So let's talk about why do you think there is such a gap in terms of gender in the world of dance and ballet?
I mean, there of course are like, I think Martha Graham and Isadora Duncan and like those really great examples. But when you think about the number of examples on the male side, they're so outweighed. It's like not even funny. And you have people like Crystal Pite and Gemma Bond, people like that today who are like amazing choreographers. But again, like I just feel like they're outnumbered, especially in the ballet world and especially in the classical ballet world. And it probably stems from the fact that like, love me some Pettipaw, like, love me all the, original. And like, yeah, at that time, women probably weren't allowed to choreograph, but we're built on this foundation that's like a lot of things in the Western world that need a lot of help. It's built on this white patriarchy and it needs help. And I think that, we throw a couple of women into the mix and we say, oh, look, we're fixing it, but it's not enough. Like, we've come a long way from Pettipaw, and like we need to be doing more. And it's like a lot of times it's not hard. Like I don't understand why like people act like it's difficult. I had someone tell me like, oh well, women don't volunteer to choreograph, and I'm like, I don't know. Like I know a lot of women who do, and they're either turned down because they don't, it becomes a cycle of like, well, maybe some women don't because they don't see other women do. And then maybe some women do, but they haven't been given opportunity before. And then if they get lucky, they get considered by someone, well, they look at them and they're like, well, you don't have a resume like some of these other guys because they've never been given the opportunity. And it's like this cycle that perpetuates the limitation instead of like seeking out female choreographers, and especially of color. Like that's a huge problem in the dance world. It's like so whitewashed. It's the worst thing ever. And it's like hard for me to speak on because like I'm kind of part of the problem in that way, I suppose. Like I want to see more people of color being given these opportunities and in companies. And it's just, there's a lot to go when it comes to diversity, but I don't think it should be that hard. There's so much talent out there. Like,
I think that there are a few companies that tried to make a difference. I just don't think it came from the right place. It was more from, look at us, we are doing something, versus we're here to change the industry. We're here to stand behind a message that is really important to us. And I think that's where so many of the issues actually come from when we're talking about male versus female. We're talking about diversity in skin color, in whatever. I'm personally having such a hard time with getting even into that, because for me it's super easy. I don't understand the mindset. I just don't understand why we have to think that way. For me, it's super easy. All we have to do is bring in everybody. You great? Be part of this company. You fit our mission. Come and be part of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why we're making it so complicated. Never have, really.
A lot of times, especially, it just becomes unconscious. Like people don't even realize they're doing it unless they're like, someone shakes them and says like, look at this problem. And even then they might be like, I tried, or I did this or that. And it's not enough. And again, it comes just from like old ways. Like, that's the way it's always been. That's just how it is. And it's like, no, we can't use those like as excuses to defend the problems in ballet. Like,
so exactly. I don't think in 2021, because it has been done this way, is no longer a viable answer to anything that's being asked.
yeah,
I think it's a crop out. I think it's laziness. I think it's comfortability. And I actually gonna go so far and say, what are the people doing that are actually supporting these kind of standards?
right.
Because dance companies, ballet companies, performing arts companies do not exist without donations from other people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And when they give them money, do they know what's going on? Do they understand what these companies are standing for? Or are they just sitting in the audience enjoying the show, and that is it? Because if that's the case, I don't even know where it starts, right? But it is everybody's problem. There is not just 100% of blame. There is at least 300 or 400% of the situation to give out, and everybody should take 100% responsibility for their own part.
Yeah, like we all have to think about what we consume on a daily basis and what we decide to support, and where our energy goes and our time goes. So yeah, it's sort of like up to everybody to make a change. And yeah.
Yes, it is up to everybody. I was recently in a Clubhouse conversation, and we were talking about who should be igniting the change.
Mm-hmm.
And there are artists out there that 100% believe that it is the leadership's responsibility. And it was for me so eye-opening that we underestimate that, even though that may change and that the structure may change, we always will take ourselves with us, and regardless in what kind of circumstances we go, regardless on what other contracts we are going to take on, we always take ourselves with us. And if we don't change,
Mm-hmm.
our reality around us won't change at all. We will always attract the same problems, the same people, the same scenarios. And I think it is so imperative that everybody is in this together, that we're actually seeing it as it's all of our problem. Mm-hmm. To look at and to see, not to blame anybody, but to take radical responsibility.
Yeah, it's tough because, like, you know, you have some people, like, when it gets down to the situation where there's like victims of things, it's like, I feel like the people who are in charge are responsible to protect the people they are in charge of, to make sure that there is not a victim situation. But I mean, there's a lot of issues in dance companies from the top all the way to the bottom. So, and the bottom all the way back to the top. And I think that we can all take part in, you know, writing that. I saw this great Instagram bio the other day of a photographer, and her little like byline was just less egos, more amigos. And I was like, that's just like the way we should probably all live, particularly in the dance world.
Yeah. And you know what? I actually strongly believe that everything that we're experiencing and what has actually been uncovered over the past year and a half comes all down to ego. Mm-hmm. Every single problem, because it has been created by ego and not by our true mission to create.
Right. Yeah. It separates like who you know, are we being viewed as, or what other people think of us, or this, that, and the other. And it's like, well, what do you really feel in your heart? Like, what do you want to see get made? What do you know, that kind of thing. So, I mean, you know, we're never going to get rid of egos, but there's definitely a healthier way to live with them versus not.
Yeah. And
for sure.
Just alone the awareness around it, I think, would already ignite some very profound change. Do you remember in the beginning of our conversation how I asked you, where did this come from? Like, we're inside. Mm-hmm. I think we're trying to fit ourselves into this box, into this circle of perfection of what it means, what we believe it means to be a ballerina, that we forget and unlearn over the course of our training and then in the company, that we're not round. We have edges, we have kinks and things, and we're trying to fit in that circle, and we're not. Mm-hmm. And that's where that friction is really truly coming from, because there is so much beauty that can be produced and comes out when we allow ourselves to be who we are. Definitely. And we've forgotten.
Yeah.
So much so I didn't know who I was at the end of my career. I had no clue. I was just trying to fit in. Mm-hmm. And that very belief is, I think, the detriment of the arts.
I think so too. Like, it just becomes this thing that you don't even know what it is anymore. Right. You're just so hyper focused on like, how can I be perfect and better and whatever. Not to say that dance isn't, you know, it's definitely something you commit yourself to. It's definitely strenuous, but like, we all need to hold it, I think, in a different mentality that allows us to be who we really are, instead of trying to be. It's another thing in the dance world that I think, and other careers, where like people pleasing. People become like very hyper focused on pleasing everybody. And that can also be a personality thing. And I just wish for all the times that I wasn't myself to please others, I could just shake myself and be like, just be you, because it's way more valuable. It is way more interesting. You are like an actual individual when you're yourself. And when you're trying to please everybody else, like maybe you're perfect on the outside, but it's just a facade. Like it doesn't really mean much at the end of the day. And it's not going to make you truly happy at the end of the day, because you can't please everybody else and also please yourself. It just doesn't work that way. But again, it goes back to ego stuff. And
And nobody
psychology brought all this to my brain very frequently. So,
and nobody can relate to that perfect version anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So if we're tying the bow here, like when we're seeing dance and ballet on stage, we're actually portraying something that isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
We're portraying something that isn't authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to put on this facade nobody can rely or relate to. They can't even connect to this kind of being or performance anymore. And I think that's where the struggle of getting people into the theaters really starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we need to value artists that let themselves be vulnerable and like aren't just gonna take everything and be perfect all the time. And it's like it's valuable to have artists who are vulnerable. I've heard that luckily from a lot of mentors in my career, which I think is really great, because some dancers don't get that. And then they think that being human makes them weak or something. And
yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So 2021, 2022, what's your season like? Tell us, what's next for you?
It is a little rough for all of us. And I mean, maybe I sound a little bit ungrateful, because I should be thankful to even have a job to go back to. Our weeks have been reduced a lot. Our production schedule has been reduced a lot just because of the financial strain. And then to make matters worse, living in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we had that crazy ice storm in the early spring. And our studios, our flooring, there was a pipe that burst and they were damaged beyond repair. So they then had to luckily insurance probably stepped in to help with the cost of that, but we lost our studio space, like on top of everything going on with COVID. So they are in the works on rebuilding. We haven't been updated in a while, so I don't really know. I'm lucky that I live around the corner from a small dance school here, and I'm able to rent the studio space to take class, but we don't go back to classes until September, maybe it's September 11th or 12th. It's whatever that Monday is, but like midway through September. And then we have 3 productions this year. Nutcracker, which we're doing a full run of, which is like 30 something odd shows. So I guess good to go back with something that we know. And
is really that your first production, Nutcracker?
Yeah. So we won't start performing again until November, unless there's some small, there might be a small opportunity here or there for like a couple to go do a pas or something like that. But we don't really, those will be pretty minor. And then we have a spring mixed rep that'll be, I think, in February maybe. And then we have like another whole month of layoff period in like February, March time, like four weeks of layoff. And then we're doing Midsummer Night's Dream at the end of the season. We'll do 2 weekends of that. So only 3 productions, including Nutcracker this year, which is, usually we have like 5, 6, sometimes more if there's like little things in between. So it's hard for sure. We were up to 42-week-long contracts, and I think now we're down to like 30 or 32. The reduction in our pay, like we didn't have actual reduction to our salaries, but because we're losing weeks, it's crazy to see like the thousands of dollars that were reduced from our yearly salary because of the not being paid as many weeks. So and we can file for unemployment benefits, but that's not really a lot. It's like about 50% of your pay. and you, right now, for some reason, we have to do work searches, which usually when you have a return to work date, you don't need to do. I've heard that they're gonna not require them once we get past a certain point and we're closer to our return to work date, but we've not been laid off for this long of a period of time ever in my history with the company in the last 10 years. So it's a struggle for sure. And I wish that we were able to do more. Um, but I guess at the same time, like there's lots of time for me to work on my own projects, which I, regardless of how busy we get, I realize are so important to me and something that I won't ever, stop doing now. And especially getting into my later years of dancing. I mean, later years, like we could have a whole other conversation about like,
yeah, like
and everything, but
you're like, I don't know, baby. But you know what? I understand though, because there is a turning point when you're beyond your 20s and you get into your 30s, something changes in your body, particularly when you like after 35.
Right.
Things do change. It is different. You are more stepping into your power as a woman, particularly, which is so beautiful to watch. Like I love watching that coming out in women, particularly. And then having that grace around that our body does things differently and requires different things. And being open to that change is, I think, the most imperative thing that you can ever give yourself as a professional. Yeah,
I think so too. And that's why, like, I don't say, like, I mean, I should really stop joking about it. It's the same thing that like a few years ago I would joke about like the word fat, and now I'm like, so that's such an off limits word to me because like it's so fat phobic. It's so like I've really gotten to change my mindset around body image, which is great. But the same thing goes with age. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm old for the company, because I'm not 18 anymore. But at the same time, it's kind of ridiculous for a 28-year-old to be like, oh, like it's so silly. I think I just have a really good grip on the fact that, like entering my 30s, it already feels different than when I joined the company on my body, and it will continue to change. And then like, I know I want to be a mom one day, but I think I want to be done with dancing first, just because I've seen people go both ways, or at least very close to the end of dancing. So I think anyone can dance as long as they want to, and they can find a safe avenue to do that. But as a professional dancer, like I aim to get to 35. That's a goal, for sure. But I think just about like my life goals in general and what will make me happy. And it's kind of interesting to think to myself, like that technically means a majority of my dancing years are now behind me. Just thinking about like how I want to plan things out. But I think it's really important for even younger dancers to have a good grip on retirement, and that you cannot dance forever. Like that is you have to have an idea of how you want to transition into your next phase, because we're grateful for our bodies for doing what they can when they can, and hopefully with training and good habits and good nutrition you're able to do it for a long time. But I think there's a lot of dancers who I see now like approaching the end of their career who haven't really thought about it, or have just kind of like denied the thoughts that it will happen, and it's kind of really sad to see them struggle with it and not really have a plan. And it's gonna be hard on anybody, whether you were Julie Kent or just in the court of ballet and had a great time. It's part of your life that you're moving on from. But I think denying that puts you in kind of a weird spot, and that accepting it and starting to think about it is really important. Like I've always been such a type A, like planner kind of type. So I was like attending the like career transition meetings, like very young. They were like, why are you in here? Like, I mean, they really weren't though. There's a great resource. They used to be called Career Transition for Dancers. It's through the Actors Fund. If you Google Actors Fund or Career Transition for Dancers, it should pull up information about them. And most of the time, from my understanding, it's a free service for professional dancers. They have grants, they have financial assistance, they have really good classes about like financial literacy and stuff like that. And they're just a wonderful resource. And I really encourage like all younger dancers to like reach out to them and see what resources are available, because a lot of times you need resources like that in your dance career, and no one's gonna like come and just hand it to you. I mean, they kind of do though. Like you just have to find them, and they're
Yeah.
there. But yeah, I think those are super valuable going into later years in your career for sure.
And I think that, you know, knowing more about yourself and the possibilities is so imperative to not even have that fully experienced career, but also having the faith and the knowing that the day I stop is the day where I can start a different life, or seeing it as an opportunity or something else to come in versus the end of something that's heavy and painful and hurting. It's not that it's easy to not stay on stage anymore. I'm not saying that, but I think if we set ourselves up for success there, and you mentioned financial literacy, which I just really, before we stop today, dive into. I think that's something that, because the starving artist mentality is such a it's such a story that has been put out there. It is such a, and not just amongst artists, but also on the outside. No, you have to go to school first before you go, because I need to have you an education that can make you money. What, I can't make money as a dancer? I mean, this is another conversation that you and I can have around, the paychecks and the pay structure in companies. It is ridiculous, in my opinion.
Even not in the dance world, like you were saying. Like, I saw this statistic, and I'm going to quote it totally wrong, but the idea is there. They was talking about the oldest, or not the oldest, but the millennials, the generation above us and the generation above them. So I think it's the boomers are the first one, and they had like X percent of the wealth. I think it was something like 20% or something of the wealth belongs to that population. And then the Gen Xers, who are above millennials, have like 15%. They have less than the boomers, but more than the millennials. And then the millennials had 4% of the wealth. 2%, like half of that, belonged to Mark Zuckerberg as an individual. So yeah, I was like, oh my God. And again, numbers might not be totally right, but like someone needs to, I need to find the graphic that I read this from, or like the study that I saw.
Oh, wow.
But we are the most educated generation and the poorest generation. And it's like, we've been told this idea that if you get an education, that's your ticket. But then everybody's in student debt. Everybody just keeps needing more and more and more education to be competitive. So it's like, not even in the dance world, like generationally, like we've really gotten screwed over, because it's like we did what everyone said to do, and now we're really poor.
Now we don't know where to go. Yeah,
we can't buy homes, we can't do what other generations could, because the system wasn't set up like that for us, and education's so expensive.
And if I may, we're also, particularly for millennials, is that they have adapted the beliefs around money from the other generations, meaning you need to save, don't spend, don't invest in yourself, and buy your house, buy your car, and all of these beliefs that actually, when we're diving into, are just wrong. Like, don't buy the house that you're living in. No, buy the house as an investment, so it can actually pay off, and lease your current place where you live, so you know exactly what you're spending every month. You don't have any costs coming in that might be surprising, like a water heater or anything, right? You buy a car, no, lease the car, use the cash to invest, to lease, to pay for the lease of the car. And these are just different beliefs that when you have this huge amount of student debt hanging in there, and you're so focused on using whatever you're bringing in to save, versus to make babies all the time, then yes, I can see why only 2% of the entire millennial population
Mhm.
actually has money that they can invest in themselves again. So
Yeah, it's crazy, but
yeah. Thank you. I have one last question.
yeah.
With where you are at today in your emotional intelligence and in your mental capacity, what would you tell your 16-year-old self? Like what kind of a conversation would you have with her?
Gosh, I'm trying to imagine when I was 16, I would have been freshman or sophomore in high school, probably. And I was so in love with ballet. I was in a really good environment for it in general, but definitely had a lot of misconstrued ideas about what it meant to be a good dancer. Um, I would definitely tell her to find authentic relationships. Don't find relationships because like I had a lot of issues when I was younger and we didn't really talk about it too much, but finding, I would get, I didn't learn how to build myself up in a lot of ways. So then I would look to relationships to do that. And a lot of times they were just not the right person for me or a totally toxic situation at worst. So I would tell myself to learn how to love myself then, because it would have been, I think, a little easier. But I would tell any young dancer now, like, it might feel confusing because I think it confused me at the time too. Like, what does that mean to love yourself and everything? But like, do things that you genuinely enjoy and release a little bit of control over the things that are difficult for you because they will come with time. You know much more what you're doing than you think you do. Don't put so much stock into what other people have to say, whether it's good or bad. Like, you need to start listening to yourself. I would definitely tell myself to do that.
Yeah, good. I love that. That's important. Alexandra, thank you so much for being here today. It fills my cup to hear that next generation just being a little bit more open to possibilities and just know that every step every single one of us takes into a progressive kind of direction. I truly believe this is how change really truly happens. So thank you, my darling.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so much for listening. If this message resonates with you, please pass it on to someone who needs to hear this right now. And if you like what you've heard, your feedback will go a very long way. If you just take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star review, that would mean the world to me. Till next time, point at yourself to rise to all that you are capable of.